They didn't even wait for me to finish chewing my breakfast before handing me the papers. My name is Nancy. I'm 73 years old, and until 11 months ago, I believed that if you gave your whole life to your children, they would at least give you the truth in return. I was wrong. But I want to tell you right now, before I go any further, I am not the same soft, quiet woman my children thought they left behind in that facility. What happened next is the reason I'm sitting here today in my own house, with my own name back on the deed, sipping my coffee in peace. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you the most, stay with me, because this story is for you. Before I go on, if stories like this speak to you, stories about women who got back up after being counted out, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. It costs you nothing, but it tells me you want more of these stories, and it helps other people find us too. Now let me tell you what those 4 children of mine actually did to me, and how one phone call from a doctor turned their whole plan to dust. I raised 4 children mostly alone. My husband Walter passed when our youngest was only 9, and back then there was no life insurance payout worth mentioning, no safety net, nothing but a small house with a mortgage and 4 hungry mouths. I worked 2 jobs. I cleaned offices at 5 in the morning before the sun came up, and in the afternoons I worked the register at a hardware store until my feet went numb. At night I sewed clothes for neighbors for a little extra cash. I did not complain, not once, because complaining wasn't going to put food on the table. I told myself every sacrifice was an investment, that one day, when I was old and slow, my children would be there the way I had been there for them. My oldest, Diane, became a schoolteacher. My second, Susan, went into nursing. My third, Kevin, worked in insurance. And my youngest, Brian, the one I worried about the most because he struggled in school, ended up doing well for himself in construction management. I was proud of every single one of them. I bragged about them to my friends at church. I kept photos of their graduations on my mantle like trophies. I thought I had done something right. The trouble started small, the way trouble usually does. About 1.5 years ago, I had a fall in my kitchen. Nothing serious. I twisted my ankle reaching for a pot on a high shelf, but Susan, being the nurse in the family, made a big deal out of it. She said I was getting unsteady. She said I seemed forgetful lately. I remember laughing it off at the time. I said, "Susan, I'm 72, not gone in the head. I forgot where I put my glasses, not who my own grandchildren are." But the seed had been planted, and I didn't realize until much later that it had been planted on purpose. Over the following months, my children started visiting more often, which at first made my heart swell. I thought finally they're making time for their mother. Diane would come by on Sundays with little containers of soup, cooing about how she just wanted to check in. Kevin started asking a lot of questions about my finances, dressed up as concerned mom. Do you have your accounts organized? Do you know your passwords? What if something happened to you? Brian, sweet as he seemed, started subtly commenting on how big the house was for just one person, how much upkeep it must be, how tiring the stairs must feel on my knees. I didn't see the pattern. I was just happy they were around. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning in September. All 4 of them showed up together, unannounced, sitting around my kitchen table like they were holding a business meeting instead of visiting their mother. Susan had brought a folder. Not flowers. Not a card. A folder. Inside that folder was a proposal, dressed up in gentle words, but a proposal all the same, for me to move into an assisted living facility 40 minutes outside of town. They said it was for my safety. They said the house was too much to manage. They said Susan, as a nurse, was worried about my cognitive decline, and that she had already spoken to a Dr. Ellis, who had apparently reviewed my case, a case I didn't even know existed, and agreed that a supervised living environment would be in my best interest. I sat there stunned, staring at 4 grown adults, my own children, who had clearly discussed this before walking through my door. Not one of them asked me how I felt. Not one of them asked what I wanted. They had already decided. I asked to see this doctor myself. Susan said, "Mom, don't make this difficult. We already have the paperwork ready. If you sign now, we can get you moved in by next month before the facility fills up." Before I finished chewing my breakfast, I mean that literally, I still had toast in my mouth, Kevin slid power of attorney documents across the table. Not house sale papers, not care plan brochures. Power of attorney. Full financial control. My son, the insurance man, had already drafted them. I want you to imagine that feeling. For decades of birthdays remembered, school lunches packed, fevers nursed through the night, 3 jobs held down so they'd never go without, and in exchange I got handed a stack of papers before my coffee had even gone cold. I didn't sign anything that day. I told them I needed time to think. They exchanged looks, the kind of looks that told me they'd expected resistance and already had a plan for it. Diane said gently, almost sweetly, "Mom, we just want what's best for you. You have to trust us." Trust. That word sat in my chest like a stone for weeks. Here's where the story turns, and here's the part you're going to want to remember. About 2 weeks after that ambush at my kitchen table, my phone rang late on a Thursday evening. It was Dr. Ellis. The very doctor Susan claimed had reviewed my case and recommended I be placed in supervised care. Except Dr. Ellis wasn't calling to check on my cognitive decline. He was calling to apologize. He told me, quietly and carefully, that he had never actually evaluated me. Not once. He said Susan had approached him, they had worked together years ago at the same hospital, and asked him informally as a favor to write a letter supporting a family safety plan, based entirely on second-hand descriptions Susan gave him about my forgetfulness and unsteady balance. He said he agreed at the time because he trusted Susan's judgment as a colleague, and because families ask this kind of favor more often than people realize. But something had been bothering him ever since. He said he'd since learned through a mutual contact that the family safety plan wasn't just about a facility. It involved liquidating my house and consolidating my assets under Kevin's management as power of attorney before I was even moved anywhere. In other words, my children weren't trying to protect me. They were trying to process me like paperwork, like a formality standing between them and what they wanted. Dr. Ellis told me he felt guilty enough that he wanted me to know the truth directly from him before anything was signed. He said, and I remember this word for word, "Nancy, there is nothing in any medical record that supports the picture your daughter painted of you. As far as I can tell, you were never examined at all." I sat in my kitchen that night, phone still warm in my hand, and I felt something shift inside me. Not sadness. Something colder and clearer than sadness. I thought about every sacrifice, every unpaid overtime shift, every meal I skipped so they could eat, and I thought they didn't just try to take my house. They tried to take my mind away from me on paper, using a man's signature I never even met with so they could take the roof over my head while I was still breathing under it. That's when I stopped being their mother in the way they expected, and started being something else entirely. The next morning I called my old friend Carol, whose son happens to be an attorney, a very good one, the kind who doesn't just draft documents, he asks questions. His name was Mr. Whitfield, and when I told him everything laid out plainly, he went very quiet for a moment and then said, "Nancy, what your children attempted, if proven, isn't just unethical. Depending on how far they went with those documents, it could be elder financial exploitation. That's a legal term and it's a serious one." I asked him to help me build a paper trail. Quietly. No warnings to my children. No confrontations yet. Just documentation. Mr. Whitfield helped me request my actual medical records, the real ones from my real primary doctor, who confirmed in writing that I had no diagnosis of cognitive decline, no red flags, nothing beyond normal healthy aging for a woman my age. He helped me get a written statement from Dr. Ellis, who, to his credit, cooperated fully once he understood how far things had gone without his knowledge. And most importantly, he helped me revise my will and my financial protections before my children even knew I was aware of anything. I moved my accounts. I placed the house, fully paid off thanks to 30 years of careful budgeting, into a trust that named none of my 4 children as trustees. I appointed Carol, someone who had never once asked me for a dime in 40 years of friendship, and Mr. Whitfield as legal advisor to that trust. And I quietly gathered every text message, every email, every scheduling note where Kevin, Susan, Diane, and Brian discussed the plan among themselves, because parents learn things too, and I still had access to a family group chat they'd forgotten I was part of. Then I waited for their next move. And it came fast. 3 weeks after that call from Dr. Ellis, Susan showed up again, this time with the actual power of attorney forms notarized and ready, acting as though our earlier conversation had simply been a formality I needed to sleep on. She sat across from me with that same practiced gentle voice and said, "Mom, we really do need to move forward with this. The facility has an opening. We don't want to lose the spot." I looked at her, calm as still water, and I said, "Susan, I spoke to Dr. Ellis. I watched the color drain from her face in real time. I told her exactly what he told me, that he never examined me, that he wrote that letter as a personal favor based on her word alone, and that he now understood what that favor had actually been used for. I told her I had my real medical records. I told her I had documentation of the trust conversations, the timeline, even messages from their own group chat discussing how quickly they could process things once I was moved out. Susan tried to backpedal, saying it was all for my own good, that I was misunderstanding their intentions. I let her talk until she ran out of words, and then I told her the house was no longer in my name alone. It was already protected in a trust she had no access to. The accounts had already been restructured, and any attempt to use that power of attorney now would be met with legal action, because I had a paper trail longer than her explanation. I called the other 3 that same week, one at a time, and told each of them the same thing in the same calm voice. Not angry, not shouting, just clear. I told them I knew exactly what they tried to do, and that from that day forward my home, my finances, and my future were protected from all 4 of them. Diane cried. Kevin got defensive and tried to argue legal technicalities with me, which was almost funny, considering he was the one who drafted the very documents that would have handed him control of my life. Brian, to his credit, was the only one who actually apologized without excuses, and I'll admit that one crack in the wall meant something to me. But the trust had already changed. The house was already safe. And for the first time in over a year, I slept through the entire night without that tight, twisting feeling in my stomach. It's been almost a year since that phone call from Dr. Ellis changed the direction of my entire life. I still live in my own house. I still make my own decisions. I still have my morning coffee on my own porch in my own name, on land no one can quietly slide out from under me while I chew my breakfast. My relationship with my children is different now, and I won't pretend that doesn't hurt sometimes because it does. But I would rather carry that hurt with my dignity intact than have handed over everything I built for a lifetime because 4 people decided my usefulness had expired. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Love does not ambush you at your own kitchen table with paperwork before you've finished your breakfast. Real love asks. Real love waits. Real love doesn't need a favor from a doctor who never even looked you in the eye. I built this life with my own hands, and no folder full of documents was ever going to take it from me without a fight. If this story moved you or reminded you of your own strength, make sure you're subscribed because next week I'm going to tell you what happened when Kevin tried one more time, this time through the courts. And let's just say Mr. Whitfield was ready for him.